Noah Gragson has emerged as a lead candidate for Stewart-Haas Racing for 2024. Dillon could be headed to the 16 car for Kaulig Racing in 2024. And Sheldon Creed will not return to Richard Childress Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just shove straight those really quickly. We're going to have a start and talk about the Las Vegas purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, or Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money. And according to him, for the Cup race, it's $7,785,320. And for the Xfinity race, it's $1,329,129. So pretty good purse money for this weekend. Obviously, with the charter agreement and the money, the Cup Series is always going to get a bigger purse and a lot more of that pie. Nonetheless, some good purse money for this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Akinori Ogata. As it was announced yesterday that Akinori Ogata will drive the 53 for Emerald Gase Motorsports at the second to the last race in Xfinity at Martinsville. Akinori Ogata has made multiple starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series as well. He's won a lot of races at Hickory Motor Speedway. It's really cool to see him back behind the wheel of the 53 team. He has driven for this car in the past. I believe he's even made a start for this team this year in 2023. Hope he can do a really good job and make the field in the Xfinity Series race at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sonoma Raceway. Now, it's first reported on Corey LaJoie's Stacking Pennies podcast, but it's confirmed from Speedway Motorsports Incorporated that Sonoma Raceway will be repaved prior to the Cup Series race in 2024. I'm not entirely sure when the last time Sonoma Raceway has been repaved, but I don't think a repave is even going to help Sonoma Raceway. So I'll be honest with you guys, the racing at Sonoma Raceway has not been good for a very long time. Honestly, I think 2021 was okay, but 2022 I didn't think the race is good, and 2023 wasn't the greatest race either. And I don't think a repave is going to save the track overall. It will get some fresh pavements. You might see some really good speeds, but I think overall we may also see a lot more drivers. It might be ice, and I think drivers kind of spinning out and wrecking out quite a bit. Nonetheless, good to see, though, the Sonoma Raceway will be repaved before the Cup race in 2024. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Marco Andretti. As it was announced yesterday that Marco Andretti will drive the 7th for Spire Motorsports in the two last Truck Series races of 2023, that being Homestead Miami Speedway and Phoenix Raceway. There's been a little chatter circulating that Marco Andretti could potentially run full-time in the Truck Series and wants to run full-time in 2024, but for him to run the full season, he has to get approved on ovals. So he's going to be making his oval debut at Homestead Miami Speedway. I do believe this truck is good enough in owner's points. They obviously got the limit Kyle Larson earlier this year at North Wilkesboro. And of course, like I mentioned, Marco Andretti has been interested and does want to run full-time in NASCAR Truck Series, maybe with Spire Motorsports. Obviously, Spire Motorsports being into 3 Truck Series teams in 2024 as they are getting a lot of stuff from Accomplished Motorsports as they purchase the KBM stuff. Nonetheless, really good to see the Marco Andretti's back behind the wheel of the 7 truck for Spire. Hope he can do a really good job. I think he's going to have a decent shot. He's ran at Homestead before and ran at Phoenix, I think, in IndyCar before, so I think Marco does have a decent chance to contend. I don't think he's going to contend for the win because he's never really run at ovals before, at least in the Truck Series, but I think it's really cool nonetheless to see that Marco Andretti will drive a 7 for Spire Motorsports at Homestead in Phoenix. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Mills. As it was announced yesterday that Matt Mills will drive the 42 for Nice Motorsports in 2024 on a full-time basis with JF Electric as the main sponsor. This is an awesome opportunity for Matt Mills. He actually has driven a few select Truck Series starts or Kaulig Motorsports this year. He got a top 10 in his first, I think got a top 5 at Richmond, and I think he contended for a top 10 at Milwaukee as well. I think Matt Mills is one of the more underrated drivers in the sport currently at the moment and can get the best out of equipment when he's given the best opportunities and shots. He had some decent runs back in the day with Beach McLeod Motorsports as well. Now, do I think that Matt Mills next year in 2024, do I think he's going to perform as well as what Carson Osmar has done? No, absolutely not. But I think Matt Mills will have a decent chance to make the playoffs next year. You got some drivers moving up from the Truck Series. You got Carson Osmar moving up next year. You got Zane Smith moving up next year. You do have Haley Deegan. She's moving up next year to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And you're going to have, and potentially Matt DiBenedetto as well can move up as well in 2024. I think the goal for Matt Mills is again for a playoff spot. I don't think he's going to win 3 or 4 races, but I think Matt Mills will have a decent chance and opportunity to somewhat contend. Glad to see those getting the opportunity and chance. And I'm glad to see he'll be full-time in the Truck Series in 2024. This is a competitive team. We've seen this team do a pretty good job with Carson Osabar, though Nice Motorsports and Carson Osabar is not behind the wheel. They tend to struggle a little bit more. So nonetheless, glad to see he's getting a chance and opportunity to drive for Nice Motorsports on a full-time basis in the 2024 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Riley Herbst will drive the 98 will be returning to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024, driving the number 98 car once again. This is a little bit of a surprise considering there have been some rumors and speculation of Riley Herbst maybe moving up to the Cup Series on a full-time basis in 2024. But it's really good to see that Riley Herbst is returning to Stewart-Haas Racing because Riley Herbst and Stewart-Haas have had some squabbles on the radio, have had some tension on the radio. Next year for Riley Herbst going to 2024, there are going to be no excuses for it because Riley Herbst did miss the playoffs in 2023. But I will defend Riley Herbst on one thing. Riley Herbst was really not at fault for some mistakes that happened with the team. There were a lot of electrical issues. There were some problems near the end of the season. Because remember, the first 6 or 7 races, he finished in the top 10 in all of them. And was at one point contending for the regular season championship and could have had a chance to win. But over the second half of the year, he just fell off. And he had some good runs in the second half. He had a chance to win in Nashville. He's having some good runs. Most recently, the Charlotte Roval got a top 5 as well. The goal for Riley Herbst for the rest of the 2023 season is to try to end the year off on a high note. Because Riley has said publicly that he does not want to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series until he does win an Xfinity Series race. Next year will be the 5th year for Riley Herbst. And while I think he struggled at times, and I think at some point he's got to put up because next year he's going to be 25 years old, I think Riley Herbst will be able to win next year. He's come close time after time again. He's shown some pace and showed some speed. He's come second multiple different times. He's come second in the past with JGR and with Stewart-Haas Racing. Hopefully SHR can fix their equipment and improve their equipment going into 2024. Nonetheless, glad to see that Riley Herbst is going to be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think the goal for Riley Herbst is to try to contend for a championship in the 2024 season. Granted, he's not really been able to do that at this point, but I think his goal going into the 2024 season is to try to improve on his stuff. So we'll see what Riley Herbst can do going into the 2024 season, but glad to see he'll be returning to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. I would not also be shocked or surprised if we see him run part-time in the Cup Series with Front Row and maybe even Rick Ware next year, but I think it's cool to see that Riley Herbst will in fact be returning to SHR in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. Now, there's been a lot of chatter in recent weeks circulating around Frankie Muniz and where he potentially could end up driving in 2024. Now, Frankie has made it no secret that he wants to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series or the Truck Series in 2024. And according to an article from Austin NC for Motorsports Wire, he mentions a few rides that Frankie Muniz can end up driving for in 2024. The first one being ThorSport Racing. According to Mark Crystal from frontstretch.com, Frankie Muniz could run part-time in the NASCAR Truck Series with ThorSport Racing in the number 13 truck. Now, obviously, Haley Diggs, she's moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series at AM Racing in 2024. And if Frankie was to run full-time with ThorSport Racing in the 2024 season, he would need to find some full funding and sponsorship. It's no secret this year in ARCA, he was struggling to find some sponsorship and funding. But the other ride that has surfaced recently about where Frankie Muniz can end up driving in 2024 is RSS Racing. RSS Racing has multiple rides that are currently available in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. And I think if he was, in fact, to go to RSS Racing in the 2024 season, I do believe that he would be decent. Again, I think the Xfinity cars are kind of similar to the ARCA cars, so he'd probably be able to get up really, really quickly. Now, a lot of people don't believe he should move up from the ARCA Series in 2024 because he didn't do great. But Frankie Muniz actually had a pretty solid year. He actually, I think, finished 4th in the standings, but for a majority of the year, he was 2nd in the points. In fact, the first couple weeks of the year, he was the points leader. And while he only scored 1 or 2 top 5s, you do have to remember that Frankie Muniz was in Retta Jones Racing Equipment. And this is no disrespect to Retta Jones Racing Equipment. They're not a Joe Gibbs Racing level team or a Venturi Motorsports team. If he'd been doing that with Venturi Motorsports, I'd be questioning a little bit, but he drives for Retta Jones Racing, and they don't get as much backing and support. But Ford wants to move Frankie Muniz up. So I'm thinking at this point, with all the speculation and rumors, I think that Frankie Muniz is going to to end up with RSS Racing in 2024. Now, Frankie's planning to make his announcements in the short future, but I do believe that Frankie Muniz is moving up next year. Will it be Xfinity trucks? I think he'll run full-time in trucks at RSS Racing, and I also think he'll run part-time in the truck series in 2024 at Thor Sport Racing. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but nonetheless, glad to see that Frankie Muniz is likely moving up in the 2024 season. I personally believe he does deserve to move up in 2024, and we'll see what happens, but it sounds like he'll be moving up in the 2024 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, yesterday was a massive day for Kyle Larson, as Kyle Larson was at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he has done his rookie orientation test that he's required to do if he wants to qualify for the 2024 Indianapolis 500, and Kyle Larson, in fact, did complete his rookie orientation program, which means that Kyle Larson will have the attempt to qualify for the 2024 Indianapolis 500. Kyle Larson, of course, will be driving for Aaron McLaren in 2024 in the Indianapolis 500 in the number 17 car with Hendrick backing. Rick Hendrick and Jeff Gordon were both at that rookie orientation test yesterday, and they were praising Kyle Larson at that test. And Kyle Larson also has Tony Kanaan as a driver coach, and Tony Kanaan even praised Kyle Larson in the media center, and he said that Kyle Larson is one of the best drivers he has ever seen in this generation, probably the best driver of this generation. It still feels surreal to me that Kyle Larson is going to be running the 2024 Indianapolis 500. And I do believe that Kyle Larson has a really great chance and a really awesome opportunity to potentially win the 2024 Indy 500 because Aaron McLaren in 2023 and even 2022, they were one of the fastest organizations. Felix Rosenqvist had one of the best cars in that race in 2023, same with Pato O'Ward, and I do believe that you're going to see a really strong team in 2024 for Kyle Larson. Even Hendrick Motorsports come into play, and of course Kyle Larson get up to speed really quickly. There were times yesterday where he was going way too fast because he wanted to go fast and quick. And he even said yesterday that he was going around 220 miles an hour at one point and said it was as fast as an ARCA car when they had the fresh pavement. Because remember, 2012, they had fresh pavement in Michigan, and he said he was going as fast as that. Kyle Larson said it didn't feel really hard either. He said the transition was kind of easy for him to get behind it with the Indy car. I think a lot of that does come from his sprint car efforts. Now, like I said, Kyle Larson has a really good opportunity to do something that's never been done before. He could become the first driver to win the Indy 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same season. Because remember, the Brickyard 400 is coming back in 2024. Now, obviously, Kyle Larson does have to qualify in the Indy 500, of course. But I do believe that Kyle Larson will not only qualify for the Indy 500, it wouldn't surprise or shock me if Kyle Larson does, in fact, win the pole for the Indy 500. I think he's going to have a great opportunity to do that. And I think he'll be very quick as well. But it still feels surreal to me that Kyle Larson is, in fact, running the 2024 Indy 500. It's going to feel crazy to me, and I'm just so excited to see that Kyle Larson is going to run the Indy 500 2024. Really exciting stuff. Glad to see, and I'm glad to see he was able to pass his rookie orientation test and will, in fact, be running the Indy 500 or qualifying for the Indy 500 in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith. Now, I kind of talked about this on the channel on Monday or Wednesday, but it's reported from Matt Weaver from Sportsnet.com and the short track scene that Chandler Smith, it sounds like he might not want to return to Kaulig Racing in 2024. It sounds like he may not be wanting to return to Kaulig in 2024, and he might get his contract bought out from Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, one thing to note about Chandler Smith's contract is Chandler Smith does have a 3-year deal with Kaulig Racing. So his contract goes through 2025 because he signed a 3-year deal with Kaulig Racing. However, I think Chandler Smith is getting frustrated how things are going and his funding might be drying up. So where could Chandler Smith be going to? Like I mentioned a second ago, Chandler Smith may in fact be headed back to the Toyota stable in 2024 and might be driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. It'd be a very interesting move because remember, he was originally offered an opportunity to drive in the Toyota stable in the Xfinity Series in 2023 after it was announced that Kyle Busch Motorsports to be switching to Chevy, and Chandler Smith did have an opportunity to stay with Toyota. However, some are speculating and believing that maybe he had an opportunity with Sam Hunt Racing and not an opportunity with Joe Gibbs Racing because the rides had been filled up. Sammy Smith has sponsorship and funding. John Hunter, of course, drove the 20 car, and that 19 car became an all-star car, but he also could have had an opportunity with JGR. if Chandler Smith does end up leaving and getting bought out and going back to JGR, it would be a very interesting move. But it would also potentially be a possibility that if he does go back there, he could have an opportunity to, in the future, go up to the NASCAR Cup Series. Let me explain. Next year, John Nemechek is moving up to the Cup Series to drive for Legacy Motor Club, but there is a chance at the end of the 2024 season that Martin Truex Jr. could retire. And then I would believe that John Nemechek would get bought out from Legacy Motor Club and moved over easily to that number 19 or the 18 car if they are to renumber it, which would open up the possibility that if Chandler Smith did have a really strong year with Joe Gibbs Racing, he could then move up to the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. Because remember, Legacy Motor Club will be switching to Toyota in the 2024 season. So that would be a really good opportunity. Now, if Chandler Smith does end up, in fact, going to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season, he would be expected to contend for the championship. And I think Chandler Smith does have the capabilities because he won one race with Kaulig Racing, but it's no secret that Kaulig Racing is not as strong as a team like Joe Gibbs Racing, though he has been somewhat of a championship threat and still could win the championship this year in 2023. And he could also win this weekend at Vegas too, because we saw how strong the 16 car was at Las Vegas. The second half year has been a little bit of a struggle for Chandler Smith, but it'd be very interesting to see him go back to JGR in 2024. Do I think he's going back? I don't know. I do not know at this point if he is going to, in fact, make a return, but it sounds like there could be a chance that we see Chandler Smith get a bought out of his contract with Kaulig Racing, head back to Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but Chandler Smith may, in fact, be headed back to JGR in 2024. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed. Now, I did a special video on this a couple days ago, but it was announced on Wednesday evening that Sheldon Creed would not be returning to Richard Childress Racing in 2024. And Richard Childress Racing will make an announcement in regards to drive the 2 car in the near future. Then about an hour after I released my video, Sheldon Creed would put out a statement saying that he's excited about his 2024 plans, and he made the decision to leave Richard Childress Racing at the end of this season. Now, first thing I want to ask is, where do I think Sheldon Creed is going to go? Before that, let's talk about Sheldon Creed and Richard Childress Racing. Sheldon Creed has been solid at RCR the last couple of years. He has not won a race yet with Richard Childress Racing, but he's come very close to winning. I think he's gotten 5 or 6 runner-up finishes, and he came very close to winning the Darlington race last year in 2022, and he has had a lot better year in 2023 than the 2022 season. But his teammate Austin Hill has been way better. Austin Hill has already this season scored a combined, this year, 4 victories and has 6 wins in the last 2 years. Like I said, Sheldon Creed is still looking for that first career victory, but he's come close many times. You go back to Portland, where he had one of the best cars in the field, and you also go back to Daytona, where he had a really good close finish between Justin Allgaier and himself, where they had a really close finish. First thing I want to ask is, where do I think Sheldon Creed is going to go in 2024? Well, there's a lot of speculation right now that Sheldon Creed could be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season. And a lot of people believe it's because he's got sponsorship and funding. And if you're going to go to a team, you're going to need sponsorship and funding. And Joe Gibbs Racing has potentially 3 cars that are going to be available. Now, I do believe they are going to have an all-star car once again in the 2024 season. So they'll have a driver lineup with a lot of guys. Probably John Hunter and Ty Gibbs are going to run part-time with that team next year, at least to get some more experience in Xfinity, to try to help them Cup, even though the next-gen car and the Xfinity car are completely different. But you also have to think about some other possibilities. Ryan Truex has been mentioned as a possibility for Joe Gibbs Racing on a full-time basis. We know that Ryan Truex is going to run part-time next year in 2024, but he wants to go full-time. But then you also got Chandler Smith, who's also a possibility of leaving Kaulig at the end of the year and going back to Joe Gibbs Racing, going back to Toyota family, like I mentioned a little bit earlier in this episode. If Sheldon Creed does, in fact, head over to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2024 season, there are going to be no excuses for him. He is going to be expected to step up to the plate and be a championship threat, because you're going to be the same equipment that John Hunter Nemechek's been in this year, and John Hunter has won 7 races. And people say, well, what about Sammy Smith? Sammy Smith's only won 1 race. Well, Sammy Smith's a rookie. He's only 19 years old, and Sammy Smith's been at times pretty good this year, and he made it to the round of 8. But I do believe that if Sheldon Creed does in fact leave the Chevy camp and ends up going to Toyota, there is a potential possibility to move up to the Cup Series in the future. He could go to Legacy Motor Club if Martin Truex Jr. retires at the end of 2024, and then that would mean that John Hunter then, of course, would go to the 19 or the 18, the number that they renumbered to. You could potentially have Sheldon Creed go to Legacy Motor Club if he does well enough. If Sheldon Creed does, in fact, head over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, he needs to win some races. He needs to get at least 2-3 wins minimum, and I think, honestly, needs to be a championship threat. And I know there's going to be some good competition next year. You're going to have Austin Hill, again, going against him, and you're going to have other drivers going against him as well. Now let's talk about the 2-car and who could be in that 2-car in 2024. There's a lot of chatter surrounding this too. Some people believe it could be Ty Dillon, but Ty Dillon, we'll talk about him a little bit, why I don't think he's going to go there, because I think that Ty Dillon more than likely is going to Kaulig Racing in 2024. There's other drivers mentioned. Roger Carruth. Roger Carruth does not have a ride currently at the moment for the 2024 season. And according to what he said about a week ago, he said he's had contact with multiple different teams about going to them in the future. You also do have Christian Eckes, but Christian Eckes more than likely is going to return to McAnally Hilgeman Racing in 2024. You also have Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto has not signed a ride for 2024, and Whelen is going to be sticking around with that team next year, so Matt DiBenedetto would not need sponsorship and funding to go there. And then you also have Noah Gragson, but Noah Gragson's probably going to be headed to another organization we'll talk about here in just a little bit. The driver, a lot of people, though, have been linking to the 2-car, and this one actually surprised me a little bit, but I'm thinking about it. Parker Retzlaff. Parker Retzlaff put out a week ago, put out a tweet with a pen emoji saying he has a signed ride for 2024, and obviously the timing is very interesting in regards to that. Parker Retzlaff, I think, is a very underrated driver. He's done a really good job this year in the Xfinity Series with Jordan Anderson Racing, already scoring 6 top 10s throughout the 2023 Xfinity Series season. And I think if Parker Retzlaff goes to the 2-car, I think he will be a championship threat and will win races. While he didn't make the playoffs in the Xfinity Series this year, he had a chance to. And I think that Parker Retzlaff has had a pretty solid year. So I'm thinking it's going to come down to Noah Gragson, Matt DiBenedetto, and Parker Retzlaff on who will get that 2-car in 2024. Nonetheless, wishing Sheldon Creed the best of luck. I think he will be headed, though, to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about the number 16 car. Now, we've talked about this number 16 Cup car for a very, very long time on this channel. There's a lot of speculation surrounding this 16 car. It is expected that AJ Allmendinger will more than likely return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024. But AJ Allmendinger recently went, I think, on a podcast on Racing America, and he says that Kaulig Racing is still forming its 2024 plans for the Cup Series with that number 16 car. We know that Daniel Hemrick, of course, will be driving the 31 car in 2024, but he could still be in the 16 car next year. However, AJ did confirm that if he does not run full-time next year, if he does return to Xfinity, he will at least be part-time in the Cup Series in 2024, more than likely in the 13 car that we have seen run a few races this year. Now, here's what I think at this point when it comes to AJ Allmendinger. I think more than likely AJ Allmendinger is going to be returning to the Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024. I would love for AJ to return to the Cup Series. I think AJ Allmendinger is the best fit driver for that 16 car currently at the moment. However, one thing that is going against AJ Allmendinger is the fact he does not have any sort of sponsorship or funding. Granted, Celsius is sponsored him, but that is a Kaulig Racing sponsor more than anything else. And AJ knows that he's a team player. He'll do whatever Matt and Chris says. And like I said, AJ does not bring the most sponsorship and funding. And it's a shame, too, that this has all come up because this past week, of course, we know that AJ won at the Charlotte Roval. So it's really disappointing that this is coming up currently at the moment because I think AJ Allmendinger does deserve to be in the Cup Series next year. But I think at this particular point, I don't think that there's a really good chance that we're going to see him back in the Cup Series next year into 16. But at least we'll see him part-time minimum. So he's going to be in a Cup car because we know he's going to be with Kaulig for sure next year. But if he goes back down the Xfinity Series in 2024, I do believe that AJ Allmendinger will be a championship threat and a championship contender. Because I think that 16 car in Xfinity is going to be really good, and he's got a lot of road courses. We know that Kaulig's had a little bit of issues with the road course program this year in 2024, but I think that if AJ comes back down, there's overseeing the operation or working with the team a lot more, I think that that team is going to be a lot better. But let's speculate a little bit about the 16 car for 2024. Who do I think is going to be driving it in Cup? Well, if AJ does return to the 16 car, this could be an opportunity to be maybe one thing I've seen people bring up is that this could be a car that's run with multiple different drivers, that being AJ Allmendinger perhaps. Maybe Shane Van Gisbergen gets loaned out and runs a few races. That is certainly a possibility. I know that Shane does have a long-term development deal with Trackhouse Racing, but Trackhouse Racing has worked, of course, with Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Ross Chastain has driven for the team, and of course, Daniel Suarez has made a couple starts with the team as well. We haven't seen any of the announcements for Shane Van Gisbergen scheduled for 2024 at this point, but SVG could have an opportunity to run. There's other drivers who could have possibility of going there. You also have Noah Gragson who go to the 16 car in 2024, and there's even other wild cards like someone like maybe a Carl Everts perhaps could drive the 16, or even Matt DiBenedetto could drive the 16 as well. But a lot of people are thinking that this is going to be one car that is going to be full-time in 2024, and many believe is going to be Ty Dillon. It was announced this week that Ty Dillon will not be returned to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season because it was confirmed on Tuesday evening that Carson Osvar will be driving the 77 car for Spire Motorsports in 2024. And according to the deal, it is a multi-year deal. And Ty Dillon put out a statement after it was announced that he has announced it coming very, very soon. Now, obviously, I already talked about a second ago, but Sheldon Creed isn't returning to RCR next year. But I do believe that Ty Dillon is going to be more than likely to 16. And a big reason is the sponsorship and funding. Ty Dillon does, in fact, have sponsorship and funding, and he could be in that 16 car because that Ferris Motor sponsorship. Now, do I think Ty Dillon deserves to be in a 16 car for Kaulig Racing next year? No, absolutely not. Ty Dillon has not done much in the Cup Series. I get he's a veteran of the sport, and I get he's trying to pave his own way, but Kaulig does have connections with RCR. I know Ty Dillon, like I said, would love to do it his own way, but Ty Dillon, as of course, is the grandson of Richard Childress, and of course, Kaulig Racing does have an alliance with RCR. So I'm thinking at this point, he's probably going to end up in the 16 car, but if Ty Dillon does in fact end up in the 16 car for Kaulig Racing in 2024, I think it's a massive downgrade from AJ Allmendinger. You look at Ty Dillon. Last year in the 42 car, he only scored one top 10 finish. And while Noah Gragson, who was in that car, was worse, you have Carson Osvar scored 4 top 20s. I think Ty Dillon only scored maybe like 6 or 7 top 20s throughout the whole entire season last year in 2022. So he completely struggled with Legacy Motor Club, which of course last year was Petty GMS. I think that if Ty Dillon goes 16, this car's average will drop 2 or 3 positions. I think Ty Dillon will be lucky to score even 1 or 2 top 10s because Ty Dillon is on track to be the only full-time Cup driver to not have a single top 10. Hell, Shane Van Gisbergen, who's ran 2 races this year, has more top 10s, and Riley Herbst has 1 or 2 top 10s in his career. So I just don't know at this point why they would bring Ty Dillon in, but the only logical reason they bring him in is because of the sponsorship and funding. But it sounds like currently at the moment that Ty Dillon more than likely is headed to Kaulig Racing 2024. Personally, I wish AJ would stay in the 16 car, but I think at this point it is going to end up being Ty Dillon who ends up in the 16 car in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, I talked about this on the channel on Wednesday, but Bob Pockers was on the Door Bumper Clear podcast earlier in the week, and Bob Pockers says that Noah Gragson has emerged as one of the lead candidates to potentially head over to the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. Obviously, it is no secret that Eric Almirola has not made a decision yet for the 2024 season, but a lot of speculation going around in the garage is that Eric Almirola more than likely is going to retire at the end of the 2023 season. And maybe there's been some speculation he become like a driver coach or do what Josh Wise is currently doing in the Ford camp, because Smithfield, I think, may be backing out of NASCAR in general and focusing on the MLB, or maybe even heading over to Joe Gibbs Racing and sponsoring there in 2024, which Eric Almirola could head over there somehow, but I don't think Eric Almirola is going to be headed out of the Ford camp. But Eric Almirola is expected to lead the 10 car at the end of 2023. Now, the 2 lead candidates, like I mentioned, are Cole Custer and Noah Gragson. And we all thought he easily would be Cole Custer, but I'm starting to think Cole Custer is going to return to the Xfinity Series in 2024. They need someone that needs bring sponsorship funding. And Noah Gragson, to be fair, does bring a little bit of sponsorship sponsorship and funding. He does have Black Rifle Coffee. Black Rifle Coffee is no longer with Legacy Motor Club anymore, so that would open up the possibility right there to bring a company like Black Rifle Coffee in, because you're going to need a company to come into play that's going to back for Smithfield, because Smithfield, like I said, more than likely is going to be gone at the end of the year, which would bring the Black Rifle Coffee sponsorship. Now, personally, when it comes to Noah Gragson, I don't really see this as a fantastic fit for him if he goes to the 10. You think about the drivers who are currently at that team. Ryan Preece, blue-collar guy in the 41 car next year. Chase Briscoe, blue-collar guy in the 14 car for SHR next year. And then, of course, you have the other driver being Josh Berry, going in from the Chevy camp, moving into the 4 car for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. Of course, placing Kevin Harvick at the end of the year. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't know if this is an upgrade for Noah Gragson. I think SHR is a little better than Legacy Motor Club, but next year, I think Legacy Motor Club is going to be way better than Stewart-Haas Racing. I'm worried that if Noah Gragson does, in fact, head over to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024, there are going to be struggles for him. Because, like I said, Noah Gragson is a guy that really lost a lot of his confidence, and I would rather see him in the Xfinity Series than the Cup Series next year. I think he is deserving of our opportunity in the Cup Series, but I'd rather see him in the Xfinity Series next year, maybe with Kaulig Racing, or if he was going to go to a team that has a better fit, I think Kaulig Racing would fit that mold a lot more. But again, I think it all comes down to sponsorship and funding. And things can change very, very quickly in the industry on who gets these rides and who goes where for each of these seasons. So do I think Noah Gragson's going to go to the 10 car? I think it certainly is possible. Now, if Noah Gragson does, in fact, head over to the 10 car in 2024, I think people do need to have some realistic expectations. Stewart-Haas Racing has fallen off in the last few years, and they are losing Kevin Harvick at the end of 2023. They've got their good drivers on that team going the next year, Ryan Preece, Chase Briscoe, and Josh Berry. I don't think the drivers are the problem at Stewart-Haas Racing. I think the biggest problem is the fact that Stewart-Haas Racing is just all over together. They're just not that great currently at the moment. And they've had opportunities to pick up good drivers. They had an opportunity to pick up Zane Smith for 2024, but Zane Smith, of course, is going to Spire Motorsports and will have an alliance with Trackhouse Racing, and inevitably he's going to go to Trackhouse Racing in 2025. You then had Kyle Busch, who had an opportunity chance to go to SHR. He had been one of the teams that Kyle Busch had spoken for. And then Kyle Larson. Tony Stewart wanted to bring Kyle Larson into SHR in 2021, but Ford said no. Which is another reason why I'm a little worried about this potential, is because of the fact that Noah Gragson got into a little bit of controversy and trouble earlier this year, and that's why he lost his ride with Legacy. Granted, he was more than likely going to lose his ride with Legacy Motor Club regardless. It is very interesting to see what happens in regards to the story, but it sounds like Noah Gragson could, in fact, be headed over to SHR. And like I said, I don't really know how to feel about this. I think Noah Gragson, if he does, in fact, go to SHR, I think there are going to be some struggles that are going to come his way, and I think things are not going to go completely right for him. But it does sound like that Noah Gragson, in fact, could be headed to SHR in 2024. We'll see what happens, though, in regards to that. So, that is today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Noah Gragson's headed to Stewart-Haas Racing or not? Let me know your comments below. And do you think Ty Dillon is headed to Kaulig Racing or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the Round of 8 preview dropping in the morning. And then, of course, we'll also have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race here from Las Vegas. And then on Sunday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series race here from Las Vegas. And more than likely, on Monday, there will be a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. I also released a silly season update earlier today. Make sure to check that out as well. There's not one of those being planned to be released until after the until we get to the off season. So there probably won't be one for a few weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.